Minasan konnichiwa. Welcome to Anime Club. Today we are going to talk about urusai, which is a word you often hear in anime. If you look it up, you'll probably learn that it means shut up. And that's partly true. It does get used in the same kind of circumstances as we might say shut up in English, and other circumstances too. What does it actually mean? It means noisy. And we must remember that noise means unwanted sound. So, if somebody shouts urusai at another person, they aren't actually giving them an order to stop talking, the way shut up is in English. What they are doing is that they are commenting on what the person is saying or doing. And of course, if you shout it like that, urusai, then you're giving a strong hint that you might prefer the person to shut up. The second most common way in which it is used is in the expression urusai na. Now, that na is a marker for talking to yourself, for a comment addressed to yourself. So what it means is that you are talking to yourself, usually for the benefit of the other person in this case. So it's a bit like saying, what a noisy person, or something rather ruder to the same effect. But urusai gets used in other contexts as well. For example, you could call loud traffic sound urusai. You can also say that a person is urusai about her clothes. And what you would mean by that is that she's fussy about them. She makes too much noise about them, but it doesn't have to mean literal noise in a case like that. And an interesting thing to notice is that while urusai is always negative because it does mean unwanted sound, it doesn't necessarily imply criticism. For example, when I was doing homestay in Japan, a typhoon was headed in the direction of the town I was living in. The television broadcast continual reports of the storm and its approach, and when it was expected to hit, and how much rain there was accompanying it, and all sorts of things like that. But in the end, the storm changed course and headed northward toward Tokyo. And my host mother said, "Terebi wa urusakatta ne." And urusakatta is the past form of urusai. So what she was saying was, the television was urusai, wasn't it? Now, I don't think she was criticizing the television in any way. Obviously, the storm was heading in our direction, and it was the duty of the television to give as much information as possible about it. But, as it happened, the storm never came. So, all that information was unnecessary noise. In English, she might have said, well, that was a big fuss about nothing, wasn't it? But she wasn't saying that the television was doing anything wrong. She was just commenting on the nature of the sound that it was making. Now, as well as hearing urusai shouted in an angry manner, you might also hear yurusanai shouted in a very similar manner, and because they sound similar, you might think the two words are somewhat the same or related, but in fact they are very, very different words with very, very different meanings. And we'll talk about yurusanai at the next meeting of the Anime Club. If you want to know more about Japanese words, may I recommend my book Alice in Kanji Land. It's not just a book about kanji. It's an introduction to the Japanese language and a very good place to start if you want to know whether you want to plunge in and really learn this beautiful language. Thank you for attending this meeting of the Anime Club. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the comments below and I will answer. And please feel free to subscribe to this channel. これからもよろしくお願いします。解散です。